What if the most famous queen in history never truly belonged to the land she ruled? The question lands before certainty can defend itself. Gold funerary masks, marble busts carved centuries after her death, coins stamped with a woman's face meant to endure forever. History presents Cleopatra as Egypt's final sovereign, brilliant, magnetic, inseparable from the Nile itself. Yet beneath that image, evidence quietly contradicts legend. Long before Cleopatra, Egypt had already changed hands. When Alexander the Great died without an heir, his empire fractured. One of his generals, Ptolemy, claimed Egypt, not as a native ruler, but as a Macedonian Greek. He adopted Egyptian titles, wore the crown, and honored the gods. Yet the blood that flowed through his veins came from faraway mountains, not the fertile delta. Archaeology preserves that separation. Excavations from the Ptolemaic era reveal two worlds coexisting. Temples for the public maintained ancient Egyptian forms, ritual schedules, and sacred iconography. Administrative buildings told another story entirely. Papyrus records written in Greek, royal decrees in Hellenistic script, offices segregated from native citizens. The ruling elite spoke Greek, married Greek, and lived apart. Power ruled Egypt. Blood did not. Coins from Alexandria reinforce the divide. Cleopatra's profile appears repeatedly. Sharp nose, prominent jaw, unmistakably Hellenistic. There is no attempt to mimic earlier Egyptian queens. These coins were not art, they were proclamations. They declared lineage, legitimacy, and identity to the world. The Ptolemies preserved that lineage obsessively. Sibling marriage became law, practiced generation after generation. Archaeology and surviving records show it was not symbolic, it was strategic. Marriage contracts, burial patterns, and temple inscriptions demonstrate that every union aimed to protect land, authority, and blood. Cleopatra VII emerged from this system. Her father, Ptolemy XII, descended directly from Macedonian Greeks. Every recorded ancestor traced to the Aegean, far from the Nile Valley. The identity of Cleopatra's mother remains uncertain, but surviving documents indicate she too belonged to the Greek elite. Archaeology reaches its limit here. Cleopatra's tomb has never been found. Her body has never been recovered. Without bones, direct DNA is impossible. Yet genetics still enters the story, not from Cleopatra herself, but from her dynasty. Later Ptolemaic burials, tied to the royal court, reveal consistent Mediterranean markers. Mitochondrial lineages typical of Greece dominate. North African maternal lines are rare. Sub-Saharan ancestry is absent. These findings do not overturn archaeology, they confirm it. Cleopatra ruled Egypt, but Egypt did not shape her ancestry. Even so, Cleopatra disrupted expectations. She learned the Egyptian language. Temple inscriptions record her name in hieroglyphs. Reliefs depict her dressed as Isis, participating in rituals earlier Ptolemies had avoided. This was not genetic belonging, it was conscious adaptation. Cleopatra understood that ruling Egypt required more than blood. It required belief, performance, and strategy. If Cleopatra's ancestry never came from the Nile, why does history insist she represents Egypt itself? Roman narratives provide part of the answer. Historians portrayed her as dangerously foreign, dangerously seductive, dangerously Eastern. These depictions justified conquest. Later generations inherited the distortion, one tradition calling her an exotic invader, another presenting her as Egypt personified. Neither aligns perfectly with evidence. Cleopatra was Macedonian Greek by descent, Egyptian by politics, multilingual, strategically devout. Her power came not from blood purity, but from mastering identity itself. Her children carried that complexity forward. Caesarion, her son with Julius Caesar, embodied continuity Rome could not tolerate. He was executed. The bloodline ended. The myth survived. Excavations of Alexandria remind us that much has vanished. The sea swallowed temples, tombs, and streets. Artifacts that could answer lingering questions remain inaccessible. History is incomplete not because it was erased, but because time chooses selectively what it preserves. Cleopatra's DNA, or what little of her lineage can be inferred, does not terrify because it contradicts romance. It terrifies because it exposes the fragility of historical certainty. Coins, inscriptions, and grave markers reveal the meticulous management of ancestry. Temples, reliefs, and inscriptions reveal performance and power. The Nile was her stage. Her Hellenistic blood was the lens through which the world viewed her. Every decision amplified her authority. Archaeology shows that Egyptian identity during the Ptolemaic period was a negotiation, not a birthright. A Macedonian Greek could rule Egypt convincingly, but only if she understood the culture, religion, and expectations of her subjects. Cleopatra did this brilliantly. Genetic studies suggest dynastic isolation maintained Macedonian traits for centuries. Mitochondrial DNA recovered from Ptolemaic remains in Alexandria demonstrate that while rulers adopted Egyptian practices, their ancestry remained overwhelmingly Hellenistic. This corroborates historical accounts and material evidence without contradiction. Her strategic adaptation shaped the image of Egypt that history remembers. Cleopatra embraced Egyptian rituals, temple worship, and public ceremonies, embedding herself in the cultural fabric. She mastered symbols. She commanded belief. Her Hellenistic blood was invisible to the public eye, but her performance was unmistakable. Coins and inscriptions, carefully studied, reveal her dual identity, Macedonian by blood, Egyptian by projection. Her rule challenged assumptions about what constitutes legitimacy. Power was not inherited from land, it was enacted. Caesarion represented the possibility of continuation. His execution ensured that the Macedonian line in Egypt would be extinguished politically, even if cultural and symbolic traces remained. Archaeology preserves fragments of this transition: coins, temple dedications, and palace foundations. The story concludes with the weight of uncertainty. Cleopatra's tomb remains undiscovered. No DNA sample survives to definitively confirm ancestry. Archaeology, historical records, and indirect genetic studies remain our only guides. If the most famous woman in ancient history can be misunderstood for over 2,000 years, how many other identities rest on assumptions rather than evidence? Cleopatra was not the queen history promised. She was something far more complex. A ruler who demonstrated that authority can be mastered, performed, and inherited through strategy rather than blood. She reshaped Egypt without changing her DNA. She commanded a nation without being of it. She turned identity into power. And if uncovering truths like this matters, where archaeology and genetics quietly reshape everything we think we know, GenealogyX is where those discoveries continue, because the past is still speaking, and it rarely says what we expect.